This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's edition of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, as always, my guy, Adam, the Jock Strozinski, here this week to revel in the success of the Detroit Lions. 5-1. Who would have thunk it? That despite the injuries, despite everything that's going on, despite going on the road 3 times this year, the Sea of Blue marched right into Raymond James Stadiums, and they handled their business. The Lions, the fans, everybody, man, what a decisive, impressive 20-6 win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it was just a quality effort. I wish it wouldn't have started at 4. I can be honest, I tapped out around 7:30. My energy was low. I was like, oh my God. I was so overstimulated, watched a bunch of screens and the red zone and the stats and fantasy, and just it was so much going on. And that was even before 4 o'clock. And then the game hit, and it was a grinded out game. You had to focus on every play. Whew. It was a lot, but finally some good news happened for the Lions. Jameson Williams made a big play. The defense stepped up, and now we can sit here and really start to get excited about this football team. I think that it's a football team that you can get behind, and something that I got to ask my guy is, now that the team is 5-1, we got the trade deadline that's going to hit Tuesday, so I got to ask my guy, where do we go with this? Do we go all in with the Lions in the trade deadline? What do they do? But I got to find out, because what was it like Sunday, 4 o'clock, you're watching a grinded-out game, and you see the blitzing, you see Jared Goff making his way through everything, but then David Montgomery goes down. It was one of those freaky kind of games where it could have went back and forth, but I think that the key play was the Jameson play. When you get that deep punch, that's a good jab, that's a good swift kick to the opponent, and one in which they never recovered from. It was a great opportunity to get a road win against another division rival, a division leading team that is kind of making their way up the ranks in the NFL. I thought all in all, for the Lions to win that game, it proved, and the statement is, we're here and we're not going to back down to nobody.
Yeah, I think this was a huge win for this team. A couple of things, right? You go on the road, you take on a team that's coming off of a bye, so they essentially have 2 weeks to prepare for you. This is a team that, whatever you think about the NFC South, this is a team that is leading that division. This is a team that looks pretty decent when you put the film on, right? They have a good defense. They have a very complex defense. The offense is able to put points up, and you went into their house, you punched them in the face, and like you said, you grinded it out on offense. And defense, you basically confused them. You stymied them. You gave up 6 points in this game. You went out and things did not necessarily fall your way. You are a team that is built and designed to run the ball. You are built and designed to control the clock. You are built and designed to pass the ball and take shots and use those shots as daggers, not necessarily strike long distance, not necessarily put big points up on the board with your passing game. What happened? You lose David Montgomery, and you have to switch how you're playing this game. Offensively, you got to change things. And you hear it all the time. Coaches talk about wanting to be multiple on offense, wanting to be able to do different things and do it different ways. You are seeing a team that is incredibly complete. I'm not saying they're the best team out there, but I'm saying they're an incredibly complete team. And it's not just with the depth, because you have a guy like David Montgomery go down and it's next man up. Like, that running back room is looking awfully thin right now. And Montgomery goes down, and what do? They then lean on Jared Goff. And Jared Goff goes out and has a stellar performance, has a hell of a day, throws for 350-some-odd yards, throws for 2 touchdowns. He was getting a little bit beat up, let's be honest. This offensive line allowed some pressure. He had guys in his face. He was taking hits, yet he was able to stand in the pocket, deliver a strike downfield to Jameson Williams, which is important. Good to get him feeling right. Good to get him a little bit of confidence and kind of work him back into the system. But you look at how this team was able to kind of hang in there and just put their knuckles down on somebody and just drive their knuckles into their head until they eked out a win, until they worked out the win. And I think this is important. If you go and you look at this team and you look at what they're doing, they're winning in the first quarter, meaning they put points up early. They don't allow you to score. I think they've allowed a total of 6 points through 6 games. After that, you are able to essentially dictate terms, right? Everybody's now playing catch up to you. So you're forcing them to pass. You spent a lot of money this year on your secondary. Your secondary is pretty decent. I know that there were some breakdowns this week, but that being said, your secondary is pretty good. And when you've got guys dropping back to pass, that means the quarterback's holding the ball for a while. You've put a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of effort into building that defensive line. That defensive line is built to put pressure on quarterbacks. Not necessarily all-out blitzes all the time, but built to sit there and constrict and put pressure on quarterbacks. And it's playing into your hands. You are dictating terms from the very first quarter, and teams are forced to play the game that you want to play. And then in this game, third quarter has been a bit of a let-me-down for this team. This team was able to outscore Tampa Bay in the third quarter and then was able to put them away in the fourth. And look, it's important and it's impressive the way that this team has gone about their business. I don't think they get too high. I don't think they get too low. I think this team is built to compete, and I think that it is a team that is rowing in the right direction, and they're all rowing together. That is important to have a team that wants to do the little things to help create the big things. You look at that massive block that Craig Reynolds threw on the Amon-Ra St. Brown touchdown. Those are little things that don't really show up in stat sheets. Those are little things that you don't necessarily see, but they're important. They're important for what happens on the field. If Craig Reynolds doesn't throw that block, Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't score that touchdown. It's as simple as that. So it's those little things that this team is doing right, and it's paying big dividends. This is a team that has beat essentially every opponent that they faced except for Kansas City by double-digit points. That's impressive. It is weird to be through 6 weeks, and I don't know about you, and I'm not sure where your conversations have gone with people that you're close to, but I'm starting to look towards the playoffs. And with what happened this weekend with San Francisco losing, with the Eagles losing, there's no undefeated teams. The Detroit Lions basically hold their destiny in their hands. And if you look at everybody's schedule, the Detroit Lions have the easiest schedule going forward. There is a solid case to be made that they may be the number 1 seed in the NFC. We talked about a division leading team, right? Winning the North. Well, winning the North might mean that you get the number 1 seed going into the playoffs and you have home field advantage. And we've talked about what a pit it is to play at Ford Field. That would be unreal to have home field advantage throughout the playoffs. It would be crazy. But this team is doing big things. They are doing a lot of things. And this game right here is a microcosm of what's been going on this year. And I think this was a impactful statement game. Now, all that being said, what I've seen on the field with the O-line makes me scratch my chin a little bit and say, I wonder what happens when they roll into Baltimore. I wonder what happens when they face a more formidable team, a team that is able to get to the quarterback, because this offensive line, that's where the power of this team is, right? It's in the offensive and defensive lines, which is awesome. That's how you win football games. That's how you play well. You basically own the line of scrimmage. You're going to dominate. I do have some concerns after what I've seen. Now, again, the Bucs defense is very, very good. It's a very complex defense. It does a lot of things really, really well, and they're able to get to. This is the most I've seen Jared Goff harried, the most I've seen Jared Goff pressured, the most I've seen Jared Goff hit in one game. And again, makes me scratch my chin, makes me say, is there something to be worried about here? So I ask you, is there something to be worried about here after what you've seen from this offensive line this past week?
It was tough, man. Yeah, it was difficult. Now, Jonah Jackson, that's a key loss. I mean, you look at it and you say, Big V, Jonah Jackson gone. That's 2/5 of an offensive line that's not there. So it's going to have an impact. And you saw it in the run game where it was non-existent. People have noticed they only ran for 40 yards. But here's the thing. A good football team, with however any game goes, they have to be able to adapt. There's going to be a situation in which that's probably how a playoff game might look. for the Lions. That's a preview. Can your heart handle it? But as the playoffs evolve, you got to play better. You got to step it up, and key players got to make key plays. You got to get a little bit of luck. You got to have a little bit of health, and you got to have in a game these unsung heroes step up. So it's great. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's talking about the Lions 5-1. They're starting to play the playoff seeding game. They're starting to see kind of the shit talking between the Lions fans and 49er fans, and looking at the Eagles too. And because we started to talk about it last week, what's the biggest goal now that's left? Get the number 1 seed. That would be amazing if it was so true in what Dan Campbell said at the end of last year. Literally, when he said that, he was talking about the division, but now you can extend it out a little bit too. All roads lead to Detroit. All roads lead through Detroit. That could be something where it looks a whole lot better when you're facing the 49ers in Detroit than it ever would be out there against the 49ers. And here's what's good. Defense travels. Defense can play well. Defense can do a lot of good things. And this football team has shown that there's a lot of good opportunities to be able to play at a high level. I think it's really interesting when I look at this football team and the way in which this football team won the game. With the offensive line not playing well, it was still something that Jared Goff, like we said, hey, pick up this football team, and he did. And when he's playing at that level, when you get a superstar play, making a big play with Jameson Williams, now you're looking at a football team that can have playoff success. It's far down the road, cuz that's way too far. We're in week 6. You remember the Jets last year? They got off to a hot start. Remember the Jets. Whoever's in the Lions got to remember that, hey, this is a football team that needs to focus week in and week out. And it starts. We'll talk about it with the Ravens. It's going to be a tough thing. Week in, week out. Despite the schedule, you've seen it this week. Upsets happen. But I love the mindset of this football team. I love it. The offensive line does concern me a little bit, especially when you look at now your running backs kind of have taken a dip with the injury to David Montgomery. But it's kind of like that jigsaw puzzle, and here's something interesting. You lose the most reliable back, but you maybe get a little bit of a different back returning in Jahmyr Gibbs. Which
I was going to say.
Yeah, something's there. You could do something with them now to kick it off with them, but I think the one thing that people are clamoring for, it's not a 1-to-1 correlation. Jahmyr Gibbs is not running the ball 20 times. He'll get hurt. It's clear that the Lions thought that Montgomery would be the Mark Ingram and Jahmyr Gibbs would be the Alvin Kamara. So what you do now is, I think you just let Craig Reynolds see what he's got. And you in regards to the running game, I think you got to get creative, and you got to use a plethora of Khalif Raymond, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson. You got your 3 running backs. You got to use the screen game a little bit more. You can find 4 yards in this league a variety of ways. And David Montgomery gave you that thumping through the tackles threat. Now that he's gone, Jahmyr Gibbs out in the flats, screens, pitches, a little bit of creativity, end arounds, Khalif Raymond, short passing, tight ends. There's a lot of creative ways to make up for the run game situation, and I think the bye week will help. But a lot of people are noticing that rib situation, that's fucked up, dude. That hurts. That shit is not easy, and the risk of re-injury is going to be high. Bro, did you see how the lineman landed on him? Bro, he almost got squished like a pancake.
Yeah. Look, I think what this team is doing is they're doing a pretty solid job of managing those injuries, because they really are mounting at this point. And if it's not on your radar, it needs to be on your radar. But I think what is happening is the coaching staff, and I think their medical advisors and their doctors are working together. And what you're seeing is a team that is hedging its bets, right? Like, I bet you if Jahmyr Gibbs needed to go this past weekend, he probably could have went. If this was a playoff game, he would have suited up. Same thing with Brian Branch. I think if Brian Branch had to go, they'd have figured out a way to get him in that game. I think this team, what they're doing is they are in a position where they can kind of hedge these bets with the health of their team. And they're like, no, we can rest them this week because we'll get them back at closer to being 100% the following week if we give them this week off, if we limit them in practice. And I think what is happening now is you've got David Montgomery, who goes down, who's supposed to be your bell cow. Like you said, your guy between the tackles, your guy who can bounce around and really help stretch plays for you. And he's supposed to be the Thunder, and Jahmyr Gibbs is supposed to be the Lightning. So now your Thunder goes down. So now it's next man up. So Craig Reynolds is going to essentially take on that role. He's going to do a couple of things because he's a little bit of a different running back than David Montgomery. But now you're going to get Jahmyr Gibbs back this week. And so I think it puts a pressure now on your coaching staff, on your offensive schemes and your offensive coaches to design plays, develop plays, to get him the ball more, get it more to him in the flat, like you said. Maybe slide him out and put him into the slot. Have him do different things. We talked about being multiple a little bit ago. You're going to have to be multiple with him. He's not a guy who necessarily runs between the tackles. He's a guy who's better getting the edge and getting outside. So put him in position to be successful. Help that run game along. And I think what this team is doing with their injuries is they are trying to manage them and kind of mitigate the stress that they're causing each and every week, you know? So you have a guy go down this week. We'll give you a week off. You'll come back maybe in 2 weeks and you'll be a little bit fresher. You might be able to go. I mean, you looked at it with David Montgomery early in the season, right? He had that thigh bruise. They basically sat him. They leaned heavily on Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs goes out and plays a decent enough game. Again, we see that he's not built to really run between the tackles. It's not really his thing. But you spell David Montgomery. You give him a week off so then he can come back the following week. Jahmyr Gibbs gets a little nicked up, so now you're going to lean heavily on David Montgomery. Montgomery's going to go down. I don't know if you've ever had a rib injury, especially a rib cartilage injury. Oh. It's a big deal. It hurts. Everything hurts. It hurts to breathe. It hurts to move. Doing football is going to be painful for a couple of weeks. But it's one of those things where you give him this week off. You see how he recovers through basically the off week for him, and you kind of gauge that going into the following week. Now you're going to lean on Craig Reynolds. You're going to lean on Jahmyr Gibbs, and I think they're doing this with guys along the offensive line. I think they're doing this with guys in their secondary as well, where they're like, "Can we give you a week off here because you'll be better to us long term if you take this week off." And you come back the following week. Almost like what happened with Kansas City and Travis Kelce, right? Travis Kelce probably could have played that game against the Lions, but they said, no, our season is more important. Let's have you sit this week out. Whatever happens, happens. We'll put you in week 2 if you're feeling better. And I think that's kind of what the team is doing. Where is the injury concern for you? Is this a big deal on your radar? Or is this more of one of those things they're doing a good enough job kind of managing it week to week and kind of getting guys healthy and pulling them back in when they've been out and putting other guys who are banged up basically on the out or doubtful list? Where are injuries at for you right now?
It's a lot, Gus. It's piling up.
There's a ton of injuries.
It doesn't make sense, right?
Which is crazy because you're able to go and win games and half your team is beat up, which talks to the depth that they have, which I think is so impressive. Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell did a fantastic job. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what everyone's talking about is that, whoa, the front office has put together guys that step up. When do you see David Montgomery go down and the Lions still win a game? Because why? The defense is playing well. They've stepped up, bro. I've literally rewound and watched the Tracy Walker hit like maybe 400 times.
Yeah.
I know the Craig Reynolds one, he sent him flying, but the Tracy Walker one just embodies what I like to see a little bit more. The running back sending some dude flying was sweet, but Tracy Walker pile driving got a guy into the ground and then flexing over him a little bit, I thought was sweet. I loved it. I thought that's what the violent kneecap shit was supposed to embody, and that was sweet.
What was your reaction when they threw that flag? Because I started yelling at the TV. I was like, "There's no way. There's no way that was an illegal hit."
No, it was great. It was great to see. I loved it. It was the crowd reaction. I just loved the whole thing was great, and luckily they got it right. So the one thing I'm concerned about, besides the offensive line, is the kicking situation. I think that Patterson is a 40 to 49 yard guy. Anything beyond that, you're going to be nervous. So everything will play out. So because I look at it and I say that the defense really stood tall for this football team and really put it in a spot where they could do a lot of things. And that's what a good playoff team will look like, is that, hey, when one side's not playing as well, the other side will pick them up. And that's what is spectacular. I think this defense can do a lot of good things when you have a football team playing like this. And we got to give credit, because we got to look at two things here. The defense is playing well, and so is Jared Goff. I mean, quite frankly, we got to give the man his kudos. And I love the fact that he's been like, kind of saying it like, you guys wrote a bunch of shit about me, and it doesn't seem to be the case anymore. And he's flexing a little bit. Bro, when you see that picture with him towering over Baker Mayfield, he's sneaky 6'5". Like, he's so calm and he walks around, but the dude is 6'5". The dude's a big man, and he's sturdy and reliable, and he's playing well. He's playing at an MVP caliber, and I think it's something that I'm not surprised by. We've seen it before. He's done it with the Rams. The critique was, can he step it up when the fire is the hottest in the playoffs? Because he hasn't had marquee playoff games where he went back and forth and did things. Now, the game he had when he was injured was nice, and it was one of those things that put him on the map again with the Rams. But people still remember what happened in the Super Bowl when all the eyes of the world were watching, and you scored 3 points. So he had to do a lot to repair his reputation, and you got to do a lot. You got to give him a line. You got to give him some receivers. Look, it's the classic example of, can he elevate himself to the level to carry a whole football team? No, he's not a Mahomes, but you don't need that. That's a rare breed, dude. Mahomes is in a category all by himself that you just can't find too often. They're just not there. But if you get a guy that's playing like Jared Goff is right now, you can win games with Jared Goff, and they're protecting him. They got him enough. They got him a lot of things that will help, and he's playing at a high level. The relationship with Ben Johnson, the offensive line built the way it is, having Amon-Ra St. Brown, a gritty leader, has made it so that Goff in this offense looks sweet. And you got to give him credit. He's playing well, playing at an MVP caliber, combined with a defense that's violent and has a chip on their shoulder. This is the recipe that you need to start off 5-1. And it's great to see. We've seen it before, guys. I'm excited to see it, but I'm more excited at the prospect of 14-3, number 1 seed. Oh my God. I would love to not have to ever travel for the playoffs and to just walk into Ford Field for every game. That would make the DOC very happy. But I am excited to watch good football. It's great to see a football team executing. It's good to see game plan. It's good to see when your coach says about Amon-Ra, he's like, dude, that guy did everything wrong on his touchdown. He ran laterally and was like just using his instinct and called. Amon-Ra, look at the play again. He called for the block, and his dude was like, I got you, and laid out a guy and basically Amon-Ra toe taps his way into the end zone. It was beautiful all the way around, and the Lions are playing good football in a spot where you need it, and you have to credit Jared Goff because he's playing probably the best football that you've seen in a little bit of time in regards to the quarterback position.
I mean, at this point, he's playing top 5 in the NFL.
Yeah.
Like, the guy has, I think they put the stat up during the game. He's got the best, I think it's over the last 17 games or 17 weeks, something like that. He's got the best touchdown to interception ratio. And I think it's something like 29-4. He's being responsible with the football, not turning the ball over and putting the team in a bad spot. He is taking advantage of what the defense is giving and coming up with timely completions and touchdowns. And here's the other thing. Heard an interview he did with the local radio station here. He did it with Doug and Gator. And he basically said, like, look,
then you woke up
third down, and it's like 3rd and long. He's like, we're not trying to pick up all 12, 14 yards. He's like, we're trying to get ourselves into a spot where we can either go for it on 4th down or we can set up our field goal kicker. And I think that's the smart play. That's the smart mindset. I think it's little things like that people just kind of overlook.
Correct.
It is doing those types of things that lead to success and lead to winning, because you see a lot of times, a lot of teams, I don't know if you watched any college football this week or this past weekend. It was unreal what some of these guys were doing. It was also crazy if you watched the Chargers game on Monday night. They had like a 4th and 1. Instead of just picking up the 1st down and then putting yourself in position to have 4 more cracks at it, they throw a pass to the end zone that gets batted away, and now you're coming away with no points where you should have at least gotten 3. Like, what goes on with the LA Chargers is unreal. How the coaching staff there is still intact makes no sense to me. And it's those things that aren't hurting the Detroit Lions. They're doing things the smart way. It's 3rd and 12, 3rd and 14. On third down, you're not necessarily trying. Like, if it's there, you're going to take it. But you're not necessarily trying to pick up all 12 of those yards, especially when you're in or near the red zone. You're trying to maybe pick up 8 and maybe see what happens after that. Because on 4th and 4, 4th and 3, this coaching staff is probably going to go for it. And if it's within a 40-yard field goal, you've got a kicker who is pretty good from that distance. Like you said, anything past 49 yards, big concern. He's got to work on some things. But you're doing smart. You're playing smart football. You're taking what you have and you're maximizing it. Yes. I think that is what is so important.
Yes, and I think that the blessing is that this team has room to grow. You still got Jamison Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs that got to play a lot better. You still got guys that can return. You're not doing this with Brian Branch, a rookie that is going to be really special. You're not doing this with Jack Campbell, who is still developing and getting around 50% of defensive snaps. The club has got a lot of room to grow, and they're 5-1. That's special, man. That's really provides an opportunity for a lot of good things to happen, and I'm very, very satisfied with everything going on. And you look at it with Goff, and you look at it with Dan Campbell, I think that something that a little bit under the radar, using Jack Fox to punt the football so that I actually asked Aaron Glenn that question last year, but I don't think I framed it the right way. What I had asked him last year when Dan Campbell was aggressive, I think it was after the Minnesota game, I said that, is Dan kind of putting you guys in a rough spot because he'll go for it on 4th down on the 50-yard line and it won't be executed, and then your defense has got to go out there? Like, wouldn't it be better if your defense had to stop a team from going 80 yards as opposed to 50? And Aaron answered it in a way that didn't kind of exactly make sense the way I would have framed it, but I think he understood the point of the question, which is, hey, you got Jack Fox. Dan Campbell said, okay, we didn't get it. He punted the football to the 2-yard line. Beautiful. That's what we clamored for. That's smart. And you handle business. And I think that's what you got to do when you have a good defense. Maybe at that time, Campbell didn't trust the defense as much, so he was ultra uber aggressive. When you get a sense of the game that, okay, it's Baker Mayfield and he's not going to light us up too much, I think that's what Dan Campbell waits for, kind of in the flow of the game. Then he kind of gets that sense. But Dan Campbell's been a little bit wiser in his game management, and I think he's grown up in regards to being a little bit more conservative when you need to and trusting the defense to make plays, especially with Anzalone having a career year, and you got the linebackers that are vicious, and you got Kirby Joseph, Tracy Walker playing well, Cam Sutton shutting down the field for the most part. So I just can't wait to see. I want to fast forward to the playoffs, but I'm also intrigued by the Lions facing off against the Ravens. That's not going to be an easy test, but I do think the Lions will have an advantage being that they stayed here in the United States and the Ravens are coming back from London. They may be a little bit with their legs, maybe take a little bit of time to get their legs under them. If the Lions can have the opportunity, because they did have rest, victory Monday, Tuesday was an off day, Wednesday was a walkthrough. That was the situation coming out of Allen Park. Wednesday's not a full practice. If you get the opportunity to have this football team rested and ready to go, Dan Campbell's got an interesting pulse of this team. Gives the team rest, walkthroughs, lighter practices, because I do think that he wore the shit out of his team the last couple weeks, which piled up the injuries. So now he's kind of tapering it off a little bit to kind of get to the Baltimore game as healthy as possible. So we'll see. But how are your early thoughts about the Ravens? Because I think it's going to be mano-a-mano. I think this could be the game of the year in regards to back and forth, a close contest with Lamar Jackson doing his thing, making some plays, and the pound the rock style that the Ravens have. There's not as stout on the run game because of their injuries, but I think they got enough to make an interesting game. But if the Lions can get out to a lead, 2-3 touchdowns, the Ravens aren't catching up.
Yeah, I after watching, I watched a couple of Baltimore games, but after watching what I watched this past week with Baltimore versus Tennessee, I feel more and more confident.
Yeah.
As I watched the Lions game against the Bucs unfold, my confidence grew that this team was going to be able to go to Baltimore and get a win. And look, Lamar Jackson, for as good as he is and for as dynamic as he is, he hasn't been great as at his position, right? I think he has one game where he's thrown for over 235 yards. For for the most part, he's been contained as far as running the ball. I think he has one game where he's over 100 yards. And look, that is what makes Lamar Jackson special. It's that dual threat ability. It's the ability for him to put up almost 400 yards of offense, whether it be throwing the ball or whether it be running the ball, and you combine those things, that's what makes him special. He hasn't been able to do that at all this year. He doesn't look like he's he's unstoppable. This is a guy who I think when the pressure's on, he struggles to throw the football. I think the way this defensive front is playing, they're going to make things very, very difficult for him. You've also seen Alex Anzalone come a long way over the last 2.5 years. Alex Anzalone had a hell of a game against the Bucs. I think you're going to see a guy like Alex Anzalone have a big game in helping to contain Lamar Jackson and stop their run game. I think Brian Branch comes back and he's going to play in this game, and I think he will probably be the guy who spies Lamar Jackson and is going to cause him fits throughout the day. I'm not worried necessarily about their pass game. Their run game is a little bit banged up. You've got, I think it's Justice Hill. That's their running back.
Yeah.
So, again, he's a guy. Like he's there. They have a pretty good scheme and a pretty good system. So you're able to generate yards that way. Gus Edwards isn't a guy who necessarily impresses me. He's kind of like a journeyman. So it's what it is. As far as the offense goes, I'm not necessarily concerned. Mark Andrews is probably your best player that you're going to face on offense. And defensively, I think you're going to be able to get points on this team. I think this offense will be able to generate points and will be able to put points on them. And again, you win that first quarter. That's going to be the important thing. Win that first quarter, you get to dictate terms, and you get to do things the way you want to do. That being said, Baltimore has a quarterback that loves to run the ball, so you're going to have to contain him. And if you can contain him and you can win that first quarter and dictate those terms, I think this team comes away with a win. And like I said, the more and more I watched this game against Tennessee, the more and more I was less fearful of Baltimore. And the more and more confident as the Lions game went on was I that they were going to roll into Baltimore and they were going to get a win. I think it'll be a close game. I think it will be a gritty game. I think this will be one of those games where it's going to be a little bit back and forth. But I think in the end, fourth quarter, Detroit will pull away. And whether it's by a field goal or whether it's by some sneaky Dan Campbell play, I think this team gets another win. And I think they improve to 6-1. And then after that, we're just looking ahead and we're just moving on. And look, as a Lions fan, this is weird. The game ended on Sunday, and I was already jacked up for this upcoming Sunday.
Yes.
Like, I don't fear anybody anymore. I just want to hit fast forward, and I want to get to Sunday, and I want to watch them play football.
Yes.
It's a weird position to be in if you're a Lions fan.
Yeah.
And it's great, and I love it right now.
Yeah, because with Caldwell, it was more of a professional vibe, like just kind of like that smooth sailing. It's your grandpa. Where with Dan Campbell, it's kind of like you want to jump up and give him a big chest bump and a high five and do a stone cold 2 beers in the hand kind of thing with him. And I think that's where it comes from. And also too, Brad Holmes. Brad Holmes is just basically partying it up on the sidelines. He's like, just standing there just give the man a microphone and let him cut a promo. I'm Brad Holmes, and I just took over your stadium. Here we go, 5-1. Like the man, just give the man a microphone and let him talk to the crowd. The man revels in his work. He's like excited, and you got the traveling Lions fans that are like, cuz it's 15,000 deep, maybe 10 to 15,000 people. I mean, I've never seen so many videos of Lions fans cheering in another stadium in my whole life. I mean, there are literally 30 of them. So you got all these different things sprouting up in regards to content. It's amazing. So I agree. I think it's it's like a growing swell of support. And you and I have been watching Lions football for a long time. It's very fun to see it this way and that party, us versus the world mentality that's kind of going on. And at the very least, I think that the connectivity, the reason why it's like this is because the Lions have done a good job of connecting with their fans, making everybody feel a part of it. Every game that they've had on the road, they've said, thank you for the fans. We see it. Jameson Williams like, keep traveling with us. Let's go. Let's keep it going. And I think that this traveling situation is going to be good again in Baltimore, and it's going to be a fun situation. It's a hungry fan base that deserves a winner, and now we can actually talk about the stuff that's important. So we got to ask it, because the trade deadline will be Tuesday, Halloween. And obviously, all the reporters are like, please make your move on Monday. please, please, please make all your moves on Monday so that we can write about it, do all our analysis on Monday evening, and we can spend time with our kids. Because if you do a trade at 4 o'clock, we're going to have a problem. But I would say this, and the thought keeps crossing my mind as I was doing all the checks of the gear here in the office. I said to myself, because I'm obviously a fan covering the team, and it's not my job to worry about the future. I'm worried about the right now. So I was sitting in my office and walking around, and I'm going, okay, make sure I meet Adam's level, and I'm good, and I got my ideas in order, got my notes in order. And I said to myself, fuck it, go all in. Fuck it. I mean, if you look at the dynamic of the NFC, and you look at it, my opinion would have to be go all in, because I'm not worried about the future. I'm looking at the football team right now, and I say Goff is manageable at his contract. All the players that are your skill players are under contract at reasonable rates. Goff's going to cost your ass $45 million next year or so. He's going to be like, dude, Daniel Jones makes 40 and I'm 50 times better than him, so hit me with $50 million. And if he wins playoff games, you're looking at $55 million. So I look at it like just the economics of the game won't allow you to keep everybody. It just won't. But I trust that Brad Holmes will restock this team with more talent in the future. But you got young talent cheap. You got a good defense that's hungry. An NFC where your number one team is Brock Purdy that has a history of blowing leads. Jalen Hurts is not the same anymore. It's time. I would say sacrifice second and third round picks next couple years. Get 2-3 players at the deadline. One on offense, 2 on defense. Load up. Do what you got to do to make this football team go from, you just saw now Julio Jones, I think a couple days ago, signed with the Eagles. The teams are starting to make their moves. And I look at it and I say, the iron's hot. You got to strike. You got to do something. This football team as is, it's close. But I want to be more comfortable. I want to be more in a position of, let's make this a team that can be special and go as far as humanly possible. I would, listen, the NFL is tough, and there are times where you got to push. I would even push if the end result was a Super Bowl loss. Push it to the limit, get there, and you go from there. If you can trust in your drafting, you can get 6 new players young every year. Sacrifice a little bit. Sacrifice a first. Look, there's a time, if you're similar to your old guy, your boss, Les Snead was fuck them picks. You got them. I say use them. 3 more players makes this football team a team that, when healthy, I could say could be in the Super Bowl this year.
I don't know if they need 3 more players, but I think
they do. They absolutely do. They do. I
think you need to look at adding a guy or 2 to this team. Specifically, I would probably like to add somebody to the defense, whether it be the defensive line or whether it be the secondary.
Yep.
And then offensively, probably like to add another wide receiver to this team, because it really feels like wide receiver and the secondary, just those 2 positions just get beat up. And for some reason, those guys just break down, whether it's hamstrings, knees, ankles, quads, ribs. It's always something weird with those 2 positions. So just the nature of the beast. But I agree with you. I think you have to add to this team. I think you have to be smart, though, about how you do it. I'm not in the position, because I don't think this team is in the position where you can necessarily mortgage the future for the right now. I think you're close, and I think you are on the precipice of being there. But I think you have to be smart with what you're going to give up to get. So I'm in lockstep with you. I think they need to make some trades. I just probably am not willing to part with a second-round pick for something.
Okay.
So
something
it'll
good.
be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, something good. You need an interior pass rusher. You need another defensive lineman, a wide receiver, and depth is never a bad thing on your offensive line. So we'll see. Yeah. I look at it in comparison to the rest of the league. Dude, Brock Purdy's good, but he's Brock Purdy. He's only going to get better. I look at it like the Eagles are only going to get better. So strike while the iron's hot, and I think our position as fans should be to go all in. The General Brad Holmes is going to be like, well, yeah, Doc, but calm your horses here. I want to keep a couple more of those picks in my pocket here, because I can maybe use some to get in the trade and get more picks and build continuously and add more. Take my second round pick and get 2/3, and I can keep building with cheap young talent. Because just imagine this, okay? dream scenarios before we start talking about the nightmare of Michigan State for the final 6-7 minutes. Dream scenario. Jahmyr Gibbs starts to pick it up in the second half of the year after the bye week. Jamison Williams puts some shit on his hand so he can catch the ball. The opportunities are there. Jared Goff keeps playing well. Jonah Jackson returns. Big V gets a little bit healthier. This football team, I'm not going to put a lot of stock in C.J. Gardner-Johnson being really all that effective if he does return in the divisional playoffs. But I look at it and I say, you get one more cornerback maybe that can play and be a veteran leader that can have that depth. You get one, let's just say you go cornerback wide receiver. You now get a healthier David Montgomery in the playoffs, Jahmyr Gibbs in the second half of this year, Jamison Williams being that deep threat that can stretch the field every now and then. Now you got a blitzing defensive line that's aggressive and has confidence. The team is playing for that seed. I know it. They're playing like a team that's like, fuck this, we need seeds. We want to play at Ford Field because it's close. It's very close that if they don't go on this year, next year, if Jared Goff somehow or another stays between 40 and 45 and takes a contract that's kind of, negotiated in some cockeye way that they do, where you get like $10 million next year and then 45 the next year, something's good. A lot of good things are brewing with this football team to not only have success this year, but also for the foreseeable future. And just imagine the best case scenario is Lions 49ers NFC Championship at Ford Field, crowd going apeshit with that week in between. Oh my God, I can't imagine that. You look at it and you don't just get excited at the prospects of home field. Bigger goals are ahead. That's basically what I'm going to say to wrap up the Lions is bigger goals are coming, and it's just that close. It's going to be up to the Lions to seize the day and continue to play at this level, man. It's been fun.
Yeah, look, I think what they've done in the way that they've gone about their business as far as building this team and the way that they have executed week in and week out, there's a reason to be excited.
Very much.
There's a reason to be this pumped up. There's a reason to look forward. There's a reason why when a game finishes on a Sunday, you are looking forward to the next Sunday, or you're looking forward to the next Thursday, or you're looking forward to the next Monday, whatever it is next time they're going to play. There's a reason to be pumped up. They've done a really nice job putting this team together. When I come on here and I say that this team has a legit shot to be a number one seed in the NFC playoffs, I mean it. I'm not blowing hot air. I'm not trying to gas anybody up. I believe this team has the ability to be there. And that's just with the way they're currently constructed. Now, you talk about adding a couple pieces at the trade deadline. I think that depth, I think adding guys who are able to go out there and make plays, guys who are willing to buy into what this culture is, because this is what we've talked about forever and a day. We've talked about a cultural shift in our football team. You're seeing it. You're getting it. It is that grit. It is that those guys who are going to get knocked down, get back up and punch you and drag you down into the deep end of the pool. This is it. This is what all of it is. This is what Dan Campbell has talked about. And now you are starting to see the fruits of it.
Yes, sir.
And there's a reason to be excited. And there's a reason to be pumped up if you're a Detroit Lions fan. There's a reason for them to be the talk of the NFL. Because, look, going into this season, this was one of the hottest teams. This was the team that everybody talked about. This was the team that everybody was putting over. And you now fast forward a couple weeks into the season, it's all true. Like, none of it was made up. This team had all the chances in the world to basically fall flat on their face, and they have not. If you look at the one game that they lost, they had a couple ill-timed turnovers, and I think Dan Campbell learned a lesson, and it is take the points when you have the chance. When you've got the ability to go up by 3, just take them. Don't necessarily roll the dice all the time. And you've seen that. Dan Campbell has matured. You go back to the very first season of Dan Campbell. Remember when we were on here and we were bitching about Dan Campbell? And now you come to this year, you see a guy who knows when to roll the dice, and you see a guy who like you said has a good pulse on his team. He's not afraid to take that chance on 4th down. But this is also a guy who is now playing a little bit more, I guess I'm gonna use the word astute. Yes. There's like a playbook that is given to all head coaches, and like at certain points it says you need to do this, and he is not necessarily going against that grain anymore. Whereas before he kind of knew what he had as far as his team, so he went against the grain and Look, it was 4th and 8, and they were on their own 35. He was going for it. Why? Nobody really knows. Just he didn't believe in his team. At this point, he knows what to do. He's going to punt, or if they get in close enough, you can see he's willing to take that chance with the field goals. And I think that's kind of where we're at.
Yes.
I think my big concern with this team right now is probably the kicking game.
Yep.
Like, I'm really still not sure. We are 6 weeks in, and I'm still not really sure what Riley Patterson is or what he's going to be. Like, my hope is that he is that guy who is automatic from 49 yards and in, and we can maybe figure out 50 yards and beyond. But I don't know, because Dan Campbell is kind of afraid to use him. And he was proven right this week when he put him out there for a long field goal and he missed. So it'll be one of those things where I hope this team gets up early in a couple of games and you can kind of trot him out there and put him in a position to see what he does, so you can kind of learn about your kicker, because I don't really know what we have as far as a kicker. Yeah. But otherwise, you should be excited about this team.
Yes, something that I'm not excited about. I'm going to Michigan State to tailgate. Not sure when yet. It's probably going to be a jury day. Well, to catch up with college buddies and things like that. Yeah, there's no expectation the game's going to be any good. Obviously got the media pass, so I'll enjoy maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, leave about 9:30-ish if it's not out of hand by then. I just want to get my first look at the new quarterback in person, do a little scouting to see if anybody on the offensive line could suit the Lions or anything like that. So there's going to be some work involved passively, but the Michigan State game is the one in which I treat it most like the fan as a media member. But this year, I mean, because we all know, Michigan State, epic collapse against Rutgers. There's not a lot of talent. There's just not a lot of talent. If Michigan State plays their A++ game and Michigan is just sleepwalks, they got a chance. But other than that, Michigan's rolling, offensive line, defense, special teams, quarterbacks playing well. You got the best player on the field in Blake Corum, second best player in Roman Wilson, probably third best in J.J. McCarthy. So there's not a lot of deep analysis you're going to get, other than I just hope it's not like something where Jim Harbaugh is like, I'm going to take out all my vengeance from trouble with the snap and make it like a 79-4 kind of game. I've sat through that in the stands in Ann Arbor. I think it was the Bobby Williams game. I go out, have a good time tailgating, sit on those darn bleachers at the Big House. I think my one and only fan experience at the Big House was the 49-3 game. We got the first field goal, and it was a boat race from there. It was miserable, it was cold, and it sucked. I think there's a chance this could get out of hand, but in the end, Michigan State's not bringing much. They're bringing a pistol to a gunfight. And Michigan, if they do it right, they should dominate and destroy Michigan. They should destroy Michigan State. And there's an opportunity. My bold prediction would be that Michigan scores on every possession, that Michigan State doesn't stop them once. I'm looking at a neighborhood of a 50-17 kind of game, and it's going to be out of hand early. I'll be grumpy, but not too grumpy, because I know what it's going to be. And tailgating is always fun at Michigan State. I always like the environment.
Yeah, so like right now, if you ask me like where I'm at as far as my excitement level, I'm not. This to me feels like a little bit of a trap game. Look, anytime it's a bit of a rivalry game, I'm expecting it to be intense. That being said, I don't think Michigan State's a good football team at all. I feel like Michigan State would probably get beat by most MAC teams at this point. So this should be a blowout for Michigan. Michigan should roll into East Lansing and hang 63 points on Michigan State and maybe give up 7 or 10. So I'm in lockstep with you. I expect a blowout as well. But all that being said, there's no juice here. There's no juice. Heat. There's nothing here. And it's just because Michigan State hasn't been able to hold up their end of the bargain, whether it's because their coach was too busy diddling himself, or whether it's because their new head coach, their interim head coach is just kind of in la-la land and just isn't cut out for it, or whether it's because the roster is just not that good. Like, I think what you're seeing here is some of the big complaints that were starting to brew about Mel Tucker as head coach. And it was, he might have been a little bit lazy when it came to the recruiting. He might have been a guy who signed that big check and that massive contract and then just kind of hit the coast mode, because you should have a ton of talent on this team, but it's just not showing up on the field. And so I don't necessarily know if that's all the interim head coach's fault. I think that might be what is left behind, which might be some of that residual stain left behind by Mel Tucker. I just don't know if he did a good enough job bringing players in and getting players in position to elevate their game and play. I mean, we talk about K9 and how good he was that one season. It really does look like Mel Tucker got a $100,000 deal off the back of a running back that transferred in from Wake Forest. That's what this looks like at this moment in time, because you end up pushing out a quarterback that you had who did a pretty good job. At least statistically, he did a pretty good job for you. And you turn it over to Noah Kim, who can't hit the broadside of a barn. And now you've got a new quarterback coming in. You have a game against a Rutgers team last week that you really should have won, and you were in position to win. And somehow you let it slip away. Like, you just can't close the deal. You can't seal the deal on that game. That was a game that you should have locked up and put away. I think better talent and a much more talented team wins that game, even without necessarily having the best head coach. And I think this is part of some of the internal grumblings that we're starting to get stirred up about Mel Tucker.
Yep.
So look, I'm not excited to see this game. Usually me and you, we're chirping at each other. We're telling you how it is, and we're pumped up. This game,
no,
it's going to be what it is.
Less than half a segment of time. It's not even worth it. It's nothing. Yeah. There's nothing there.
Normally we build out 3 or 4 topics for this, and like, I'll be honest with you,
there's nothing there.
Week, I put together a rundown for Lions, and then it took me half the day to realize, like, I was like, oh yeah, shit, we've got Michigan State this week.
Yeah.
And I was like, you got to add something. We got to at least touch on it.
That's it.
I went back and added something because there's nothing to talk about.
Nothing to talk about. It's unfortunate. And now the only thing that state supporters are interested in, I'm curious to see how many fans show up. I'm curious to see, is it an amazing blowout? Let's see what happens. I'm curious to see how this game shakes out. Just the freak show mentality, to see the train wreck. That's about it. And that's what it's going to be, and we'll see what happens. But just to throw it out there, don't you dare let Spartans win this one. Don't you dare, because I might just go right from the press box right out onto the field. I just might do it. I don't know if I'm going to even be able to stay that long, but we'll see what happens. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Yeah, real quick, only thing Spartans are looking for is who's the next coach. Is it Urban? Is it not? And that's all we're looking for. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast for all the crazy nonsense and fun that we have in the world of Detroit sports. Anything at all. Anywhere that you listen to your favorite audio broadcast, type in Detroit Sports Podcast, and our content will find you. Because good week, good football team. Everyone's spirits are elevated. Everyone's having a good time. And let's hope the Lions can continue the winning ways, ending up being 6-1, coming back at home against Raider Nation. Ho, ho, ho. Good times ahead if they're 6-1. Let's hope that Brad Holmes is aggressive at the deadline. And let's hope that the Lions end up playing and end up leaving the game against the Ravens without any more injuries. Get some guys back, and that'll be the best thing for business for the Detroit Lions. Thanks, everybody. I can't wait to fire it up next week for the latest and greatest edition of Doc and Jock.